Good evening. Welcome to my channel, where today's regime change planning reveals tomorrow's decapitation strike through the secret Trump administration scenarios that include targeting Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei personally, transforming what was publicly described as limited strike on nuclear facilities into comprehensive operation designed to eliminate Iranian regime leadership and trigger internal collapse that American strategists calculate could remove Islamic Republic from power through single devastating blow that kills or captures Khamenei, along with Revolutionary Guard commanders, intelligence chiefs, and clerical leadership that maintains theocratic control over 87 million Iranians, whose majority secretly opposes government according to U.S. intelligence assessments, driving the regime change option that Trump is weighing alongside limited strike alternative. U.S. warns Iran that everything that flies will be destroyed represents joint American-Israeli operational concept finalized for execution within 24 hours of presidential authorization. But this warning now extends beyond aircraft and missiles to include regime leadership whose flights, movements, and security details are being tracked through satellite surveillance and human intelligence, providing real-time targeting data that allows precision strikes eliminating Khamenei at moments of maximum vulnerability when Supreme Leader travels between residences, attends meetings, or conducts public appearances that U.S. planners have mapped exhaustively, creating decision matrix where Trump chooses between destroying nuclear program while leaving regime intact, or seizing opportunity that current military buildup creates to eliminate government that has threatened American interests for 47 years since 1979, revolution that Trump administration views as historical. Injustice requiring correction through regime change that restores Iran to pro-Western orientation, serving American strategic interests in oil-rich Middle East, where Iranian opposition to American hegemony creates persistent instability that regime elimination would resolve permanently. And war started is no longer hypothetical future scenario, but current operational reality, where Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's claim that counterproposal will be ready within days, allowing talks possible within week, represents desperate diplomatic maneuver by regime that understands Trump's 10-day ultimatum is expiring and military strikes are imminent. With Araghchi's MSNBC interview stating U.S. didn't demand zero enrichment, suggesting Iranian willingness to accept intrusive inspections and strict limits while maintaining symbolic program. But this offer comes too late, as Trump has concluded through intelligence briefings and advisor recommendations that Iranian regime cannot be trusted regardless of agreement terms, and that permanent elimination of nuclear threat requires regime change rather than negotiated limits that previous agreements proved Iran violates whenever enforcement weakens. Let me explain the secret plan to kill Khamenei by breaking down what U.S. planning on Iran includes potential regime change scenarios, actually means in operational military terms beyond euphemistic language that sanitizes assassination and decapitation, strikes into acceptable policy discourse. Regime change scenarios are Pentagon contingency plans developed for multiple adversary governments where analysts identify key leadership figures whose elimination would create power vacuum triggering government collapse, map their locations and security protocols, develop targeting packages for precision strikes using intelligence about daily routines and protected facilities, and game out post-strike scenarios including who fills power vacuum, whether military maintains order or civil war erupts, and how American interests are affected by different succession outcomes. For Iran specifically, these scenarios center on eliminating Khamenei, who as supreme leader holds ultimate authority over strategic decisions including nuclear program, ballistic missiles, proxy forces, and domestic repression, making his removal potentially transformative if it triggers Revolutionary Guard fragmentation, clerical establishment power struggles, and popular uprising exploiting regime weakness to establish new government aligned with reform elements that Americans believe exist within Iranian society and military but cannot act while Khamenei's security apparatus maintains control through fear. Secret plan suggests these operational details remain classified, not because assassination is illegal under U.S. law prohibiting targeting foreign leaders for political purposes, but because Trump's legal team has crafted interpretation where Khamenei's role as commander of Revolutionary Guard forces makes him legitimate military target during armed conflict, rather than political leader protected by executive orders and international law prohibiting extrajudicial killings. This legal distinction allows targeting Khamenei with Hellfire missiles from Reaper drones, bunker buster bombs from B-2 stealth bombers, or special operations raids similar to Osama bin Laden operation, while claiming Operation Targeted Military Commander, not political figure, though everyone understands Supreme Leader's death, would be regime change through decapitation rather than counterterrorism strike. And everything that flies will be destroyed. Warning extends to regime leadership movements where Khamenei and senior commanders travel by helicopter between secure facilities, creating vulnerability windows where American or Israeli aircraft could intercept and destroy these flights, killing leadership, while appearing to target military aviation assets rather than conducting political assassination. Intelligence agencies are monitoring Khamenei's movements through technical collection, including satellite imagery, identifying helicopter movements from known regime facilities, signals intelligence intercepting communications about Supreme Leader's schedule, and human intelligence from sources inside Iranian government reporting on security arrangements and route planning that allow predictive analysis about when and where Khamenei will be vulnerable to strike. This intelligence targeting integration is same capability that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020 when U.S. drone strike at Baghdad airport eliminated Quds Force commander, and similar methodology killed Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in November 2020 through Israeli operation, demonstrating Allied capability to track and eliminate high-value Iranian targets despite extensive security precautions regime employs. Current military buildup provides cover for regime change operation because comprehensive strike campaign against nuclear facilities, air defenses, and missile sites creates operational environment where targeting leadership appears as logical extension rather than separate assassination program that would face legal and political constraints if attempted in isolation without broader military campaign providing context and justification. But Araghchi's counterproposal ready in days represents Iranian regime's calculation that offering diplomatic concessions might prevent strikes they assess are imminent based on American military positioning and Trump's increasingly aggressive rhetoric. Counterproposal substance remains unknown, but Araghchi's MSNBC interview revealing that U.S. didn't demand zero enrichment during Geneva talks suggests Iranian offer will include maintaining limited enrichment capability at low levels, incompatible with weapons production, accepting enhanced IAEA inspections, including access to military sites that previous agreements excluded, implementing real-time monitoring of centrifuge operations through cameras and sensors preventing clandestine breakout, and potentially agreeing to ship out existing stockpiles of 20% and 60% enriched uranium that are closest to weapons-grade threshold. This would represent significant Iranian concession from current position, refusing any external constraints on sovereign enrichment rights, but likely remains insufficient for Trump, who has stated publicly that Iran must accept zero enrichment similar to Japan and Germany, who maintain civilian nuclear power without domestic enrichment capability by importing fuel from international suppliers. Araghchi claiming U.S. didn't demand zero enrichment could be Iranian spin, attempting to lower American expectations and make forthcoming counterproposal appear more reasonable by suggesting Trump is willing to accept limited enrichment that previous American statements indicated was unacceptable, creating negotiating space where Iran offers what it portrays as meeting American position that was never actually articulated, allowing both sides to claim success while achieving different objectives that set up future violations and confrontations, continuing cycle of crisis and negotiation that has characterized U.S.-Iran relations for decades. And deal would be a miracle, according to Analyst assessment captures widespread skepticism that diplomatic breakthrough emerges from current positions where fundamental distrust between parties exceeds any specific technical disagreement about enrichment levels or inspection protocols. Miracle means outcome requiring divine intervention because human political calculations make compromise impossible given domestic constraints each leader faces. Trump cannot accept agreement that allows any Iranian enrichment without facing Republican criticism that he surrendered to adversary and betrayed campaign promise to eliminate Iranian nuclear threat, while Khamenei cannot accept zero enrichment without appearing to capitulate completely to American pressure that 47 years of revolutionary ideology has resisted at enormous economic and human cost to Iranian society. This incompatibility of domestic political requirements means even if negotiators find technical compromise on nuclear issues, selling it to their respective constituencies requires framing that contradicts the other side's requirements, making sustainable agreement impossible because neither leader can deliver their base's support for deal that opponents will characterize as betrayal or surrender. Military buildup fuels uncertainty in Tehran, according to reporting, because Iranian decision-makers cannot determine whether Trump genuinely seeks negotiated solution or whether diplomatic engagement is theater providing political cover for military strikes Trump has already decided to conduct, regardless of Iranian offers, creating paralysis where regime doesn't know whether making concessions prevents war or whether concessions are wasted gestures that won't prevent attacks planned independently of diplomatic track. This uncertainty serves American coercive strategy by keeping Iran off balance and preventing confident resistance that would harden positions against any compromise, but also risks miscalculation, where Iran concludes nothing, they offer matters, and therefore maintains current position, accepting inevitable military confrontation rather than surrendering preemptively for no benefit. Iranian clerics talking tough as U.S. war threat looms reveals regime's propaganda strategy of projecting strength and confidence to domestic and international audiences, despite private fears about American military action that intelligence intercepts show is creating genuine panic within Revolutionary Guard command structure and clerical establishment that relies on military for regime survival. Clerics talk tough by issuing statements about Iranian resolve, Revolutionary Guard capabilities, divine protection from American aggression, and historical Iranian victory over superior forces, creating narrative where resistance is religious and nationalist duty that true Iranians and Muslims support regardless of material calculations about military imbalance favoring America. This messaging serves internal control function by preemptively delegitimizing any opposition that might exploit American strikes as opportunity to overthrow government, framing such actions as treason and collaboration with enemy rather than patriotic reform movement responding to regime failures. But tough talk also reveals fear because volume and intensity of statements exceed normal propaganda baseline, suggesting regime is attempting to reassure itself and supporters who understand that American B-2 bombers and Israeli F-35s can destroy Iranian military infrastructure regardless of religious conviction or historical memory, that Revolutionary Guard officers invoke to maintain morale among forces facing overwhelming odds. Intelligence analysts monitoring these statements note increasing desperation in rhetoric, where clerics acknowledge American power while claiming Iranian asymmetric capabilities level playing field through missiles, drones, proxies, and terrain that supposedly neutralize American technological advantages, revealing regime's understanding that conventional military confrontation against U.S. forces is unwinnable, requiring asymmetric tactics and strategic depth to survive initial onslaught and impose unacceptable costs through sustained resistance over months or years, rather than preventing immediate tactical defeat that opening American strikes will produce. Expert Brett Velicovich, warning that Iran repositioning strike drones amid joint drills with Russia, reveals operational preparation for retaliation that regime is conducting simultaneously with diplomatic outreach, hedging bets by preparing military response while hoping negotiations prevent need to execute plans that have been war-gamed and rehearsed. Iran repositioning drones means moving Shahed 136 loitering munitions and other UAV systems from storage facilities in Iran to forward deployment locations in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, where they can launch attacks on American bases, Israeli cities, or Saudi oil infrastructure immediately upon receiving orders, rather than requiring transit time that could allow American intelligence to detect preparations and conduct preemptive strikes, destroying drones before launch. Joint drills with Russia provide cover for this repositioning by creating legitimate reason for increased Iranian military movements and communications that would otherwise appear suspicious to American surveillance monitoring for signs of imminent Iranian action, while also providing Russian expertise in drone operations, target selection, and electronic warfare that improves Iranian capability to conduct effective strikes despite American defensive systems designed to intercept these threats. Velicovich, as former special operations intelligence analyst and drone expert, understands Iranian tactics because he tracked similar activities in Iraq and Syria, where Iranian-supplied drones attacked American forces, giving him credibility when warning that current drone repositioning suggests Iranian military planning for war scenario, while regime's diplomatic statements suggest peaceful intentions, revealing gap between words and deeds that intelligence professionals recognize as indicator of impending action that adversary wants to conceal. Bipartisan U.S. lawmakers opposing Iran war powers resolution represents congressional resistance to Trump's unilateral military authority and reflects Iraq war legacy, where presidential war powers produced catastrophic commitment without adequate legislative oversight or public debate about strategic objectives and acceptable costs. Opposition coming from both Democrats who oppose military intervention on principle and libertarian Republicans who support presidential authority generally, but view Iran war as exceeding defensive use of force permitted without congressional declaration, creates political coalition that could theoretically constrain Trump's freedom to order strikes, though legal analysis suggests President retains significant latitude for limited duration operations that don't constitute formal war requiring congressional authorization under Constitution and War Powers Resolution. Congressional opposition matters politically because it signals to Trump that sustained military campaign beyond initial strikes would face legislative funding restrictions and potentially impeachment proceedings if casualties mount or operation expands beyond stated objectives without new authorization, constraining Trump to limited strike option that destroys Iranian nuclear facilities while avoiding regime change operation requiring weeks or months of sustained bombing and potential ground force deployment for stabilization that Iraq experience proved is impossible without clear political strategy for governance after regime falls. This congressional constraint paradoxically makes Trump's secret plan to kill Khamenei more attractive operationally because decapitation strike eliminating supreme leader and triggering internal regime collapse achieves regime change without requiring American occupation or nation building that Congress opposes, allowing Trump to eliminate Iranian government through single operation that Congressional War Powers Resolution doesn't clearly prohibit because it targets military commander rather than conducting prolonged armed conflict requiring formal war declaration. USS Gerald R. Ford entering Mediterranean provides visual demonstration of American military might that serves psychological warfare function, even though experts confirm Ford's 75 aircraft aren't needed for strikes to proceed because existing forces are locked and ready, meaning Ford's transit is strategic messaging rather than operational necessity. Ford entering Mediterranean gets significant media coverage showing America's most powerful warship heading toward crisis zone, creating impression of inevitable American action that psychological operations specialists calculate might produce Iranian capitulation without requiring actual strikes by convincing Khamenei that resistance is futile against force this overwhelming. But Ford, several days from reaching operational position, means that if Trump orders immediate strikes in response to Iranian refusal of ultimatum, Ford won't participate in opening attacks that locked and ready forces conduct using Abraham Lincoln carrier already positioned plus land-based aircraft at regional bases and Diego Garcia B-2 bombers, with Ford joining follow-on operations if campaign extends beyond initial days into sustained effort requiring continuous air presence that single carrier cannot maintain indefinitely without relief. Dual carrier deployment is rare but not unprecedented, last occurring during major crises where America demonstrated maximum commitment to allies and adversaries, signaling that Trump views Iranian nuclear threat as requiring extraordinary response that justifies deploying greatest concentration of American naval power since Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. IDF on high alert amid Iran tensions, but no change in guidelines to public reveals. Israeli military preparing for Iranian retaliation while government calculates that public safety measures like bomb shelter activation or northern evacuation would create panic, undermining economic activity and potentially encouraging Iranian attack by signaling Israeli fear that leadership wants to avoid projecting. High alert means Israeli forces are ready to intercept Iranian missile salvos using Arrow long-range interceptors for ballistic missiles, David Sling for medium-range threats, and Iron Dome for shorter-range projectiles. While fighter aircraft maintain combat air patrols and ground forces positioned near Lebanese border, anticipating potential Hezbollah ground incursion that might accompany Iranian strikes, creating multi-front crisis, overwhelming Israeli defenses through simultaneous attacks from multiple directions. No change in public guidelines means civilians are told to continue normal activities without special preparations, reflecting government calculation that Iranian retaliation, if it comes, won't be massive enough to justify disrupting society preemptively, or alternatively, that government wants to maintain element of surprise for offensive operations that public mobilization would telegraph to adversary, providing warning to disperse forces and harden defenses. 59% of Israelis supporting joining U.S. strikes, according to polling, provides political cover for Netanyahu government to participate in joint operation, though this support could evaporate if Israeli casualties mount or Iranian retaliation succeeds in causing mass casualties that public blame on government's decision to provoke conflict that could have been avoided through continued deterrence rather than active military engagement. And Trump's secret plan to kill Khamenei exists within broader regime change scenarios that U.S. planning includes, with multiple options developed for different contingencies, including decapitation strike targeting only Supreme Leader and senior Revolutionary Guard commanders, comprehensive campaign destroying entire government infrastructure, forcing complete regime collapse, or covert operations supporting Iranian opposition groups with weapons and intelligence, enabling internal overthrow that appears organic rather than American-imposed. Secret plan specificity depends on classification levels, with some details available to congressional intelligence committees for oversight purposes, while operational tactics remain restricted to small circle of senior military and intelligence officials with need-to-know access, preventing leaks that would compromise missions requiring surprise. Plan to kill suggests kinetic military action rather than covert political operation, though distinctions blur when special operations forces or CIA paramilitaries conduct raids that appear as conventional military strikes but operate under different legal authorities and oversight mechanisms than traditional Pentagon operations. Khamenei's target represents maximum impact, minimum footprint approach, where eliminating single individual potentially triggers cascading effects throughout system that depends on his authority to maintain cohesion among competing factions within Revolutionary Guard, regular military, clergy, and intelligence services that might fragment into warring camps once unifying authority disappears, creating civil war or military coup that achieves regime change without American forces occupying country. Iraq war flashbacks concern that experts raise by noting Trump's Iran buildup signals. Pressure campaign, not regime change, reflects military analysts' assessment that force structure is optimized for aerial bombardment, not ground invasion. But this analysis could be wrong if Trump envisions regime change through decapitation, plus internal opposition rather than American occupation that Iraq war model represented. Retired General Philip Breedlove and other analysts pointing to deterrence focus rather than invasion note absence of armor brigades, amphibious landing forces, and logistics tails supporting sustained ground operations, suggesting Trump plans to destroy nuclear facilities through bombing while avoiding boots-on-ground commitment that American public and Congress oppose based on Iraq experience. But this assessment assumes regime change requires conventional invasion when actually decapitation strike killing Khamenei, plus bombing campaign destroying Revolutionary Guard infrastructure might trigger internal collapse that opposition forces exploit to seize power without American ground troops intervening directly, which would be regime change through indirect methods that avoid Iraq war parallels while achieving similar strategic objective of removing hostile government and replacing it with friendly regime serving American interests. Trump learning from Bush mistakes means avoiding occupation while pursuing same regime change goal through different operational approach that leaves aftermath to Iranians themselves rather than American administrators attempting to rebuild society they don't understand. War started is not formal declaration but de facto reality, where military operations have begun through cyber attacks, drone strikes, proxy confrontations, and intelligence operations that constitute hostilities short of open conventional warfare that media recognizes as war, but which legally and politically occupies gray zone where neither side admits conflict has commenced, while both conduct operations designed to degrade adversary capabilities and achieve strategic objectives through violence. American cyber attacks on Iranian command networks disrupting communications. Israeli drone strikes on Iranian facilities in Syria, killing Revolutionary Guard advisors. Iranian proxy attacks on American bases in Iraq and Syria causing casualties. Iranian naval harassment of commercial shipping in Persian Gulf creating tensions. All of these constitute warlike activities that in previous eras would be recognized as armed conflict, but modern warfare's ambiguity allows both governments to claim peace exists, while preparing for escalation that transforms cold conflict into hot war through miscalculation, accident, or deliberate decision that Trump's ultimatum appears designed to force within 10-day window that began counting down from ultimatum announcement and expires within days from now. The convergence is complete where Trump's secret plan to eliminate Khamenei through decapitation strike combines with comprehensive campaign destroying everything that flies to create regime change operation disguised as limited nuclear strike that Congress cannot effectively constrain and that Iraqi war skeptics won't recognize as occupation requiring legislative authorization. Araghchi's counterproposal ready within days represents desperate Iranian diplomatic gambit that comes too late, as Trump has concluded regime cannot be trusted and must be eliminated rather than managed through agreements that Iran will violate. Deal would be miracle because domestic political requirements make compromise impossible for both leaders facing constituents who oppose surrender or accommodation. Military forces are locked and ready to execute upon presidential authorization that intelligence agencies assess is imminent based on Trump's rhetoric escalation and ultimatum timeline expiring. Ford entering Mediterranean adds psychological pressure, even if not operationally necessary. Israeli public supporting strikes provides democratic mandate for Netanyahu participation. Congressional opposition constrains sustained campaign, but not initial operation. Iranian drone repositioning proves regime preparing retaliation while hoping negotiations prevent need to execute plans. And war started through accumulation of hostile actions that have not yet crossed threshold into open conflict that single presidential order will initiate by directing locked and ready forces to destroy everything that flies while potentially executing secret plan, eliminating Khamenei and Revolutionary Guard leadership through precision strikes, creating chaos that Iranian opposition exploits to overthrow government achieving regime change. Trump secretly seeks, despite publicly claiming limited nuclear objectives that sanitize assassination and decapitation operations, into acceptable policy discourse that American public and Congress will accept when presented as necessary response to Iranian nuclear threat that decades of diplomacy failed to resolve through peaceful means that Trump administration determined were exhausted before military option became inevitable through Iranian refusal to accept terms that American demands and Israeli pressure require.